But I move to this as well. The Federation of Governing Bodies for South African Schools says that teachers and pupils are much safer at school than home this time. To elaborate on this, FEDSAS CEO, Mr. Colditz, joins us for a conversation. Thank you so much for your time and good morning to you. Now, you're taking a stance that teachers and learners are actually much more safer when they're in a controlled environment, meaning at school during this wave. Why do you think so?
Well, that is the experience we had. Sorry, good morning. That was the experience we had last year. Granted, it was under a different variant, the original variant of the COVID-19 virus. So we have a new variant now. We're not actually convinced or sure that it will be safer for children outside of the school than when they are in the controlled environment, and that applies also to the teachers and the education workers at schools. We've seen that even at the time when schools were open, children believed that the safety and the health protocols were school rules. So the moment they are outside of the school gates, they start hugging and getting rid of their masks and socializing, etc. So, given our experience of last year, we would expect that it would be safer for children and for workers at schools where they're under the controlled environment. In the absence of convincing medical advice, we think that would still be the situation, and we're a little surprised by the request by the eNCA that schools should not reopen.
Yeah. As FEDSAS, then, what's your proposal to the eNCA, to the minister ahead of her, obviously briefing this morning in terms of how to phase in these learners? Because remember last year, it was done in groups. The grade 7s would come with their matrics and so forth and so forth. Do you think this year it should be at one go, or does that phased-in plan work and show more effectiveness?
Well, it worked last year. It definitely worked last year, but again, that was different because it was the first time we were confronted with this crisis. We now have a bit of experience and history, again, subject to the fact that we're not quite sure and we don't have the necessary information with regard to the effect this new variant will have, particularly on adolescents. But again, we're not sure what exactly the minister was going to announce, except for the fact that what we were told on Wednesday night by the Department of Basic Education is that the eNCA requested them to consider only reopening primary schools at this stage as planned, in other words, 25 and 27 January, but secondary schools later. Now, we don't understand what the difference is for teachers, particularly for adults. Even if it is adolescents in secondary schools that are more susceptible to infection, what is the difference between the teachers in primary schools and secondary schools? There's no difference. So the logic of deciding to open primary schools and not high schools at this stage escaped me.
Well, Mr. Colditz, we're reading some of the tweets, and it seems parents are quite concerned about the safety of their children. And I remember having, even one of my conversations this week from a report that was done, or a survey rather done by the University of Johannesburg. It seemed that, parents from higher income, communities were actually more confident, were at more ease, that they can entrust those controlled environments in schools. But it seems the parents from lower income communities were quite concerned about hygiene, about whether windows will be open, about just the social distancing in class because of the status of schools in some of those low-income communities. I mean, how would you then sort of comfort such parents raising these concerns?
Well, again, I also saw that report, and I can understand. I can understand the anxiety of parents. We are all very concerned about the safety and health of our children in particular, but also the teachers and the education workers. But the problem is that we are not sure, and the Department of Basic Education and provinces have failed to communicate with us exactly what the state of readiness of the provinces, of the schools, is with regard to reopening safely at the beginning of the year as it was originally announced. We had enough time to prepare, provided that there was proper communication. So now at this stage, we're not sure, and we cannot give anybody the reassurance that it is actually safe to return. That is something that we must be advised about by the experts and by the provincial departments of education, whether schools are in fact ready. And we had, as I said, we had enough time to prepare, so there shouldn't really be excuse. But again, the problem is that those parents who say they're very concerned about the safety of their children at schools, what about outside of the schools where they're not necessarily in a controlled environment? And we know that quite a number, even the majority of learners, don't come out of your traditional household where you have a father and a mother, at least one of which are at home and can supervise the children. So at home there's no control of the children, and you don't know where they're going. So the risk of infection is probably higher outside of the school grounds than within the school grounds.
Well, FEDSAS CEO Paul Colditz, thank you for your time.